let me very quickly go into this session. And this connects with what we have been saying earlier, and moving into the Oceania Whole Life Wellbeing Index. Um, that will be at the final slides. Uh, uh, but for now, just to say here that one of the big learnings from Melbourne was to clarify and to amend, review, and sharpen the contents of REM, particularly the well-being measures that were identified. And as a result of that, some revision work has been done, and there is also an extended version of the document, the training manual, that has been in the process of being finalized. In direct response to one of the earlier questions, in the original well-being measures that were identified under the REM framework are quality of environment, access to land and sea for subsistence, availability of basic needs, familial communal connections, healthy relationships, safety and protection, opportunities for work and living, health and wholeness, education and learning. As was pointed out if by James and also myself, well-being cannot be defined just from one angle, one perspective, or one cultural experience. Well-being has to be measured according to various contexts. And secondly, I mentioned earlier on that the well-being here goes beyond GDP. It goes beyond monetary economic values and includes non-economic and non financial aspects as well. So these were the 9 original um, measures of well-being under REM. Now, some of the lessons that we learned, comments that were raised, that there were a lot of similarities, overlaps, and repetitiveness in some of these well-being measures, and therefore the need to work through them again. The need to define, clarify each of the well-being measures, and that has been taken on board. And again, coming to the question early in the first session, how to actually measure or quantify the success or otherwise failure of these well-being measures. Um, and to be clear on how and in what ways development partners could help with their church partners in the region, some of which Reverend James has already highlighted. But these were some of the major learnings from the Melbourne training, which we have taken into account. And for those of you who were at the first training and those of you who are new following the Melbourne training, a training manual was developed. And this training manual has 9 modules to it, as you can see there, the module titles. And this was completed immediately following the Melbourne training. And was circulated amongst PCC, but also referred to AOA as well. I will not go through all of that in detail because of time, but you can just have a look there what the modules are and what the module titles are. So the training manual is in the process of its final revision, and it is also being revised, amended, because of the input and the insights and lessons that we got from the first training, and because of the additional work that we have done, the additional research that has also been conducted following Melbourne, and therefore therefore it is in the process of its final revision. And the purpose of this training manual is to enable training in the PCC member churches starting in the new year, of course, with the guidance of PCC management and executive. And Reverend James has also already alluded to and highlighted the importance of that happening, where church leaders and stakeholders come together to be able to do this and to roll that out. And the training manual is targeted um, to be used during those training events. And the hope is that this resource document will be presented and endorsed for training rollout at the upcoming General Assembly in November. I know New Caledonia, which Reverend James, the GS, has also already mentioned earlier on. Following the discussions, these are the amended and the consolidated well-being measures. We have reduced them to 7. And the way that they are presented here is not in any particular sequence or not yet in any particular order of priority. But these have been reduced to 7: availability of basic needs, quality of environment, healthy relationships, safety and protection, and we can say from violence and harm, health and wholeness, employment opportunities, education, and learning. Now, at this point in time, well, we don't have the time to be able to go through what all of these entail, what all of these mean, but they spelled out and clarified in the training manual, in the modules that are part of the training manual. And these, as I mentioned earlier on as well, takes into consideration the comments, the insights that were gleaned from the training in Melbourne. So we will I will not be able to go through in detail all of these 7 well-being measures. One of the things that we did because of the questions was to see how we may begin towards stepping towards some ways of measuring, quantifying, if we want to put it that way. And so here, it's just taking one and fleshing out one of the well-being measures out of the 7, which is the availability of basic needs. And this is just to give us an idea of the kinds of things that we'll be looking at in relation to beginning to have some sense of measuring the availability of basic needs well-being measure. And so we are looking at healthy foods as one of the possible outcomes, and the indicators for that: evidence of locally grown foods, subsistence farming is increasing instead of dying out, resilient crop species are available and used in view of climate emergencies, in view of climate changes of climate, traditional farming and food preservation methods, talking about indigenous ways of doing, and then supply of foods from the sea, and then preservation management of marine ecosystems. Now, all of these, there's a lot that is packed into these possible indicators. And when we take those further, particularly in terms of how we may be able to quantify, for example, evidence of locally grown foods. So that then takes on a further step of some survey, research, and data collection. So just to mention that at this point. Another possible outcome is clean water, availability of and access to water supply, or like in many, quite a lot of communities where there are rivers, the big islands of the island of the region, access to running or flowing rivers and streams. In the Solomons, I know, and in PNG, I know that that is still a very predominant way of accessing water. River catchment areas and waterways are protected and preserved. Possible indicators. Again, there's a lot into those indicators, and more steps need to be taken in order to flesh those out and see how they may be quantified in one way or the other. And then part of basic needs for proper shelter, decent and livable family homes in place and maintained, availability of building materials, and this includes affordability of non-thatched buildings. Again, packed a lot of things packed into there, and that needs to be worked on. And so this is beginning to move towards some way of trying to measure and quantify the availability of basic needs as a well-being measure. Now, one of the things also, again, referring to, going back to one of the earlier questions, turning REM framework into a well-being index. So we have like foreseen that there will be the question on how will these actually be measured in terms of or quantified, and noting that what I said earlier on, some of the non-economical and non-financial areas will be difficult to quantify. And yet, by saying so, at the same time, there may be ways in order for some of these for us to have a pretty good idea on whether they are improving or whether there is no improvement, or whether instead of improving, they are going backwards. So in pursuing the need for achievable data to ascertain improvements and positive movements in life, the idea is to work towards a well-being index. There is a lot that needs to be said here. But again, going back to some of the lessons from Melbourne, this well-being index gains from analysis of other measures. And there have been other measures that we highlighted in the first training. And in one of the modules, there is also a deep dive into these other well-being measures that have been proposed from across the globe. Two in particular have proven quite useful in this analysis. One of them is the OECD Better Life Index, and this is by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. If you have had a look at the way that it is being used in countries, OECD member countries, they've used it according to the pillars or the measures of well-being that OECD has identified and endorsed. And these measures of well-being that OECD has identified in many ways, they are very similar to what we have also identified as the REM measures of index. And so OECD provides a good basis for it. But much closer to home, there is also this New Zealand Living Standard Framework, which has also provided quite a fair bit of useful inspiration. and the basis for analysis and the learnings that can be gained from that for REM, and especially from both of these in turning REM framework into a well-being index. And so this is going back to multiple comments following in Melbourne, directly connected to what one of the questions earlier on. This is the direction that REM is going, and that is to turning it into a well-being index. And now to the final slide. We would like to call it the Oceania Whole Life Wellbeing Index. And it derives directly from the REM framework. This name, this title was floated amongst PCC, the staff, responsible staff, and we had a few email exchanges and Talanoa about it. And we settled for Oceania instead of Pacific. And then we are quite happy with whole life because that is what REM is all about. It is not a life in isolation. It's not life in compartmentalized life. It is the whole of life approach, the whole of life perspective of looking at well-being, which I think you would appreciate from the 7 that we have consolidated out of the original 9. So we'd like to call it the Oceania Whole Life Wellbeing Index. And it's a long process, and there is no time to go through all of that. But just to say that to arrive at the index, a process of engagement and survey research takes place, during which each of the well-being measures, 7 of them, okay, are fleshed through use of various Talanoa methods and sessions, which will include appropriate research tools. And I'm taking us back. This will also include making use of the REM Kuarao methodology in order to gain baseline data. And importantly, as has been emphasized throughout REM and emphasized by many Pacific leaders, engaging the community to do this kind of work. And so this is community engagement, community members being empowered, building their capacity in order for them to carry out their work that looks at their holistic well-being. And so they are engaged in doing that. Of course, with research tools and the Talanoa methods of getting that in order to get those the data. And the outcomes are analyzed, and a well-being index for community is then reached. As I said, it is better, and the whole emphasis of REM is community-based, and therefore this will be work that communities themselves are carrying out. And the work needed towards the index is one that needs to be done. So basically, what I'm saying here, what we're saying is that the REM framework forms the basis, underpins the Oceania Whole Life Wellbeing Index, which we continuing to begin and continuing to work on. So thank you very much. That is the final session for today. And I'm going to now just leave it open. We just have 10 minutes, I think. 10 minutes for us to be able, if you have comments or questions addressed to our youth voices, or to myself in this final session. And our GS, PCC GS, is always ever ready to respond. And
I mean, Alvin, I think your visit last year with Rudolma, to the community in Tongaroo, that is affected severely by climate change and wants to stay in place and is willing to own that process, really speaks to REM and really looking at how this sort of impacts our local community. There's a couple of areas that you in your question that I'd like us to reflect on. The first, of course, is with regards to the need for our own Pacific leaders, including Australia and New Zealand, to understand REM. So we had in 2019 a conference a regional conference just for the REM I guess collaborators. The second was, of course, in Papua New Guinea, and then a smaller one in Solomon Islands. We haven't been able to take this further, and this is something we need to look at. How do we bring this to the attention of our government, not just our churches, but our own governments, to recognize the value of REM? That's one. The next is already, as Daphne and Wilfer has shared, we did bring this to the larger ecumenical community during the WCC assembly in Karlsruhe. It was at the heart of what our Pacific young people were doing. Presentations were presented in thematic plenary discussions on that. I think there's an opportunity with the new Commission for Climate Justice and Sustainable Development that has been approved by the WCC Assembly. It's been enacted through the WCC Central Committee, and the Executive Committee, which meets soon, actually, will finalize the membership of that commission. And this is something that we would like to take from the Pacific to that commission, from from the Pacific. It could also connect with the churches, the Commission of Churches on International Affairs, because that also touches on some development aspects. But I really agree with you in terms of where it could sit or engage with ACT Alliance. Could we journey from now through those who are in PAN to look to see whether this could be something that is at least reflected on or touched on during the ACT Alliance assembly in which Asia Pacific is a big part of next year, with it taking place in Indonesia. So already there's somewhere that this could land in the broader ACT Alliance space, and how we work towards that. And I like that because it's not just on the theology or the philosophy, or the academic aspect. When we with ACT, it's very much, as you know, you are all ACT, or most of you, that very practical aspect, and that's for us the crux of this. I think that this is also something, as you highlighted, that we would eventually, once we're organized better here in the Pacific, to have that engagement with Asia, and to see what lessons we can learn with Africa. So we have, the ACP, the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific spaces for discussion. We have our regional ecumenical organization general secretaries meeting at WCC, where we could bring these things forward. But first and foremost, it's about grounding this as a development issue and a development alternative in our Pacific Island countries, with Australia and New Zealand included, and then advocating that moving forward. And there are also spaces within the UN, UNDP, and other spaces, ESCAP, etc., where we could bring some of this to take this into the more sort of broader global areas of conversation. Every year, September, there's discussions on the SDGs and Climate Action Week. These could be places that we start to land some of these things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, James. I know we are running out of time, but if I may give, if you have I would really love for anyone to engage response. Any of you would like to do that? I know there are some chats that really appreciates what they have said, but are there questions or comments you would like to say, but to Daphne and Wilfer before I wound this up?
Maybe Daphne and Wilfer respond. That was at the heart of the REM conference in Papua New Guinea. It was built on from the Good Sin Down, and these are things that that have engaged in that space. I've shared in the chat the link for the web access to the REM publication, and maybe Kelly Ray can share some of that in an email later or follow up. There's a lot of thinking out there. And one of the things that we're trying to do, this process is about connecting people. So while, yes, there is an academic reflection and literature review that can take place, the conversation needs to be from the communities also. So we had that with Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Fiji, and other communities in the Pacific. We'd like to see more of that from the First Nations people in Aotearoa and in the land now called Australia. Wilfer and Cliff were part of a team to Aotearoa in the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, that was the time when they were people in Aotearoa were experiencing a cyclone. So that wasn't a very ideal time for discussion, or maybe for reflection. But I think these are ways in which we would like to see the circle widen in terms of who we can include in the conversation and which elders and emerging elders can speak to us, not just from the academic perspective, but really talk from a practical cultural perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. From me, the shortest answer is that yes, and thank you for raising that again. One of the richness of REM is the consultations that were done. But as James also said, we are looking to broaden that map to bring other perspectives in as well. So yes, that is most welcome. Okay. I think we are right on time now. It is 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock your time. It is 1 o'clock here. And I think this is where I will need to bring this Talanoa to an end. So before I hand it back to Kelly and AOA staff, let me just say thank you very much again for your attendance. And we hope that you have learned some things and that you have also been inspired by the stories. And at the same time, you have seen where potential possibilities are, and hopefully also that some of the things that we have shared, and I'd like to highlight again the 4 ideas from the youth people as ways of useful for you. So thank you very much again, everyone. Thank you very much, Kelly and the AOA. As a closing, I know this might be a good surprise for many of you. Going back to PNG, when we first held our consultations with churches and organizations there, as Daphne said, we had a lot of young people, and one of the things that the young people, boys and girls, presented, talked about were these. Daphne, Wilfa, do you remember these? I have a whole packet of them with me. And what these are, what these are for all of you, these are reusable pads made from clothes. And you guess who constructed these, who saw this? The boys working with the girls, which is transcending cultures, transcending boundaries, breaking down barriers, breaking down stereotypes, and at the same time saving the planet by using reusable these ones here, instead of buying the throwaway stuff from the shops. Now, talking about REM, maybe that's one practical example I'd like to end with. Does this come as a shock? I don't know. You decide, but that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. And I hand back now to Kelly and the AOA staff. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sue. Sure, I express the thanks from all of the participants online and here in the room today. Our gratitude to you, Cliff, and to Reverend James and Daphne and Wilfa from PCC. We are so grateful for the time you've invested with us today. Just particularly the opportunity to listen to the priorities you have, the vision that you see and your hopes for REM to transform, as indeed it's already doing, into a vibrant movement. We value having space to learn from your insights about what wellness and fullness of life mean in the Pacific. And we hear also the invitations, the multiple invitations of how we can be part of this alongside and together. I really liked what you had to say about embracing the messiness and the organic nature of REM as a movement, and we hear that too and look forward to the journey going forward. So thank you, everyone. We also just acknowledge again the support from the Australian AIDS Program in making this, and the underpinning research that has supported the development of those resources, made that possible. And yeah, we formally close the proceedings today. So thank you again.